The idea of the ability to comfort our environments in an efficient way, to extend that beyond energy and think about decarbonization and our carbon footprint. Looking at what tools we have out there to use, different standards like Passive House or striving for net zero. This is all the reasons that we are here today. We have an amazing panel. I've had the pleasure of kind of being a fly on the wall where they were shooting discussion back and forth down in our lab here. And the expertise, I can only echo Natasha that you have to take advantage of that. And I know we're here in terms of the built environment and buildings, but the importance of energy efficiency for me, it goes far beyond that. It goes to the industries like transportation. How do we move our goods in an efficient manner? You know, how do we just live day by day in all the different little nuances that we operate as humans as part of this country? You know, the importance of energy efficiency is everywhere. So before I turn it over to this illustrious panel, Natasha, happy Energy Efficiency Day. And I like the opening question, what did you today? Coming here, you know, it doesn't count. What did you do today? You know, I rode my bike to and from work. So that's, you know, a little bit. You hear on the radio people saying, this weather's great, it's kind of scary, and I can't really do much to change it. That angers me, and I hope it angers you guys. And that's my call to action for everybody, is even if I ride my bike today, rather than taking the car, that's one tiny little step. And you know, with any kind of big change, it just takes these tiny little steps to actually grow real change. So that's my challenge to everybody. So happy Energy Efficiency Day. And with that, I turn it over to this wonderful panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Russell. My name is Natasha Daniel. I am the communications lead at Efficiency Canada. Before we start this panel today, I would like to acknowledge the land we're on, and not do that in a performative way, but do that in a real way. Just like we've asked ourselves, what are we doing today for energy efficiency? What are we doing every day about the Indigenous issues that are happening in our country? And how do we propose allyship? We're all here on Indigenous land. This is Toronto. Toronto is a word that originates from the Mohawk word, meaning a place in the water where the trees are standing. It's also said to refer to the wooden stakes that were used in fishing weirs in the narrows of local river systems by the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat peoples. To me, there is no way that one can speak about energy efficiency without speaking about indigeneity. Indigenous people are the original environmental stewards of this land. In my opinion, we are following their lead, and they continue to show us what sustainability looks like, so much so that words like sustainability and, you know, energy efficiency, there's no need to have these words in the language. We were just speaking about this today in one of our workshops. Why would a language not need to have words like that? Well, because it's embedded in your way of living, it's embedded in your way of being, and it is a spiritual practice. And so I hope that when we engage energy efficiency, that we never neglect the idea, the very real, not even idea, the reality of Indigenous sovereignty. Because to me, the two go hand in hand and they can never be separated. We are here because of indigeneity, because of a history of colonization and a geography of violence. Why is energy efficiency and, you know, high performance building, why is that relevant? Well, because we're existing in a building right now. You come to school here, you go home, you sleep in homes, you visit people in homes. Buildings are such a big part of our life. That's where we stand right today. And so decreasing net zero emissions will eventually have to be adopted so that Canada can achieve its sustainable development goals. And that means that there's a workforce of hundreds and thousands of people that are currently working in energy efficiency and that we will need by 2030 to really get this off the ground. Tonight's panelists are a diverse representation of this growing sector. Diversity at the core, it's not about checking a box. It's about seeking people and workers who have diverse mindsets. That's what I mean by building high-performance teams. Diverse backgrounds, educational backgrounds, and values. It's about building teams who think outside the box, very much like our speakers today. They are all trailblazers within energy efficiency, and I'll leave it to them to introduce themselves and the role they play within the high-performance building sector. Give them a huge round of applause. Yes, okay, that was a little sleepy, so we're gonna wake up from our day of work. Give them a great round of applause, everyone. Come on. We're in TMU, come on.
Hello everyone, my name is Abiran Raveenthiran. I am the co-founder of VXV Solutions. But before I get into that, I'd like to actually thank Efficiency Canada for giving me a seat at this table beside these wonderful individuals and professionals that are true trailblazers in the energy efficiency realm. My parents fled Sri Lanka from a civil war and genocide that actually gave me the opportunity to be born here today in Canada, this amazing place. My past actually has quite a wide range on the energy efficiency. I began in consulting, made my way as an applications engineer for lighting, and then I slowly made my way into sales management and sales channel and creating businesses and whatnot. As VXV Solutions, what we do is we bridge the gap between lighting controls and how it actually gets to market. On the engineering side, we work with them to actually implement these complex lighting control solutions. With VXV Solutions, you'll see us in Scotiabank Arena, Toronto Police Services Net Zero First Building, as well as on the business side. I work with many various interesting offshore manufacturers that actually have created very interesting energy efficient solutions and commercialize them, R&D, create sales channels, and actually implement them into Toronto's and as well as Canada's economy. And with that, I'll pass it on.
Thanks so much, Abhi. Hi, folks. My name is Fatima Crerar. I am VP of Partnerships and Strategy at the Atmospheric Fund and also the chair of the Board of Environmental Defense Canada. I'm really happy to be here today and thankful for the opportunity. I'm from Toronto. I'm from Mississauga originally. For those from Toronto, I'll clarify, from Mississauga. My parents immigrated to Canada in the 70s from Tanzania. I'm an Ismaili Muslim. And really, when I get asked this question now, I realize that my interest in working on environmental issues started when I was really young. I grew up in a household of conservationists. I just didn't know it at the time. I wouldn't have used the language, but we were reminded to turn off the lights. We were reminded to turn off the faucets when we were brushing our teeth. My dad was reusing plastic bags before it was cool. And it was about frugality in some ways, but it was also about respect. And it was about appreciating what you had and not squandering it or wasting it. And so that mindset was ingrained into me from a young age. And when I went to university, my parents wanted me to have stability. They wanted me to have what they didn't have. That's why they came here. And so they were very practical, go into something practical. And I pursued sciences and health sciences. And the more I found myself in a lab, the less I was sure I was doing the right thing. And so I took a leap and I took a year of taking everything. I took all kinds of courses. And among those courses was Global Warming 314 at U of T. And suddenly the human connection to the environment was made real to me, the human connection to the ecosystem and this impact that we were having on our natural environment and the scale of it, despite the little amount of space we take up on the planet as a whole, shocked me. I was also energized by it and I wanted to work on it. I wanted to talk to more people about it and what we could do about it. And we were talking about compact fluorescent light bulbs. We were talking about green buildings. We were talking about renewable energy. And this is 15 or 18 years ago now. I thought I was at 20 years, but it's not 20 exactly. So fast forward, I come home from school one day and I tell my dad about climatology. I found it. I found what I want to work on. I want to work on climatology. And he looked at me and I still remember it. And he said, lovingly, so you're going to be a weather girl? It's funny now. And he wasn't being derogatory. The truth was, he was like, what's the work? Like, I hear that you're excited about this topic, but what's the work? I didn't know. The truth is I didn't know. I had my parents' support. And I started to look for the work. And the thing I have learned through my journey, I have worked in the nonprofit sector, and after working there for almost 10 years on public engagement in particular, I was drawn to work in communications because I was, here we're doing public engagement on the grassroots side. But then you look at advertising firms and the way they can get people passionate about a brand or a feeling or a beverage. And I'm thinking, we need that on these issues. So I worked at a comms firm that specialized in impact marketing. So I could work with PR people and digital strategists and creatives. And from there, suddenly we had the rise of CSR. And I thought, okay, let's take corporate social responsibility. You can stop us if we use any acronyms. Please stick your hand right up. Corporate social, I do mean it. There's gonna be so many acronyms, so let's stop us. I moved into corporate social responsibility, and I was the head of social impact and sustainability at Ecobee. And it was always, what was driving me was always pursuing impact. Like how can we have more impact? So through comms, through the business world, and what I grew to learn and being pulled by impact was the power of policy change. And so that's what drew me to the Atmospheric Fund. And today my work is around partnerships, it's around operations, around helping our teams get ideas off paper and into the world. And so I'm really excited to be here today and share some of that experience with all of you.
Wepa. All right. My name is Kirk Johnson, and president of Eco Efficiency. As I look at this beautiful map behind us, and I look at having talked to the panel, I know there's some people not from Toronto, but like for the people from Toronto, we can point to so many buildings where we've done stuff. This guy especially, right? So this is a great panel. I'm happy to be here. I'm honored to be with all these rock stars. But this is what we do. We make all these buildings cool and green and awesome, right? My particular piece of heaven is market transformation, right? And that sounds really esoteric, so, I like catchy acronyms. So basically, I make rice, right? R is for the regulatory stuff. You have to have a stick like Toronto Green Standard, which we did to push people to build better at a minimum, right? But you also need to have carrots, right? You need to build incentives. So the I is for incentives, and we create those programs. And I did all these cool things like high performance new construction incentive, which in its time was the longest running and largest Canadian incentive program for new construction. So super cool stuff, right? Capacity building is the C in rice. And that's really reaching out to the businesses and saying, on a B2B level, how do I convince you to make a smarter, climate friendlier decision, because you've got a way of doing business and we need to give you guys the capacity to make better decisions, right? And they don't just wake up the next day and say, oh, I saw this thing in a TED Talk and now I'm going to do it different, right? You need to go out to them and say, no, this is how you change your spreadsheets and this is how you add it to the performa. That's capacity building, right? But, and it took me a long time, like a couple decades to get to the E, which was finally realizing that it's the jobs that matter. There's no point in changing the world if people can't get, paid decent dollars to be a part of that. We all have to be included in this climate kind of transition, right? And so employment and workforce development is where I do a lot of focus right now, and basically trying to get energy efficiency jobs, green jobs, and more green jobs, and getting people upskilled for green jobs, but also saying I want to work in an industry, I want to make that industry greener. So on the employment side, that's what I do, right? And that's a whole bunch of stuff, and you'll see it in the news next week, right? All right, over to Fellipe.
Thank you, Kirk. Extremely honored of being here amongst you today. My name is Fellipe Falluh, and I'm a Brazilian living in Montreal, Quebec. I founded my company Retrofit Construction at age 24, and I come from a family of builders in Brazil, third generation actually, and they really inspired me to go through this entrepreneurial path. I'm a civil and environmental engineer from McGill University, and I really dedicated my life to catalyzing, consulting, and executing retrofits in the built environment. My journey started when I had a duplex that I retrofitted and is on its way to becoming the first net zero ready certified building in Quebec. Really, to simplify, I like to take old buildings, give them a new life by means of an envelope and mechanical upgrades to really create a more healthier, comfortable, energy efficient, and also resilient building. I take also great pride in inspiring change within the building sector by means of training for contractors and through a podcast that I started on high performance construction. Really, the sector is growing at an unprecedented pace, and there really is a place for everyone in this journey of creating a better tomorrow.
Oh, I have one here. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Yash. My journey with sustainability actually began in this very building. I did my master's in building science and then followed that up with PhD in building science, which is currently happening. My whole perspective on sustainability lands on 3 different pillars, which all serve the huge umbrella of clean tech. And these are some of the terms that you will be hearing nonstop from all of us. So the first pillar that I always like to talk about is research. Now, research falls into a wide variety of things. So I'll succinct it down into 3 different categories that I believe that I could make the most impact in, and that's where I've been working on. One of is material side, which I look at mass timber materials, and I'm working on one of the projects with TMU and the York Forestry and Conservation Area. And we are looking at monitoring mass timber buildings for long-term high performance durability and sustainability. In addition to that, there is policy impacts on equity seeking groups. That's what I do with the entire set of professional engineers, as well as the engineering side of TMU. And last but not the least, I work with NRC on their deep retrofits and airtight buildings. That's one pillar. Then I move over to education, which is outrightly just growing. And we need more people to be educated and upskilled. So that's where I focus most of my energy in 4th year architecture course here at TMU and at the building science graduate program level, once again, here at TMU, teaching them sustainability programs and, if not, energy modeling. In addition to that, there is an online team that I've worked with, which are how to change the world. The title is ambitious. The goal is ambitious, is to bring education, hands-on education, and theoretical education back to the basics and use UN's SDG to have a progressive conversation. Last pillar that I will talk about, and that is construction and consulting, which is where I've lived and breathed for the last 3 years almost right now. And that is specifying materials, specifying deep energy retrofits, thinking about how to basically get your best return on investment, whether that may be through modeling, whether that may be through specifying different products. That's what I do in a nutshell. And I think everyone agrees on this panel, there's a place for everyone. Like if I found a spot in 5 years, trust me, there's a place for every single person in this room, in this industry.
On to me. All right. My name is Gonell, and I'll start by saying my why. What is my why and what do I do? I am the principal of Gonell Homes here in Toronto, the GTA area, as well as Gonell Developments in the States. I do mostly consulting over there. And what is my why? I was a low-income kid growing up in housing developments, unstable mother, broken household. And this is not to be a sob story by any means, but this is my why. I grew up constantly getting evicted out of homes. And I made it my life mission to correct that wrong and to wear that. If you have a limp, learn to walk with a limp and use it as your strength. And that's something that I've done with my life. Through my career, I first became a U.S. Marine stateside, served in combat, a couple of tours, became a police officer, retired, met the love of my life, moved to Canada. And then it's, okay, well, what are you doing? What do you want to do? I knew that the law enforcement and that part of my life was over. So then I decided to volunteer. Jane and Finch area was my home. I was volunteering with at-risk youths that were prone to join gangs. And our mission was, if you're not going to go to school, let's teach your trade. But coming from the military, I'm going to do as I do, not do as I say. So I said, wait a minute, why am I putting all these young adults into trade programs when I know nothing myself? So I put myself through that program. I went door to door to construction companies asking who wanted to hire me. And I started my journey from there. In my course, I became a home builder eventually after starting literally from the bottom. And this poor kid from the Bronx ended up working in $1 million homes, as sustainable as I could make them without classifying them as net zero, etc., but as close to it as I could, because I work in the custom world, so I'm limited to what the customer wants. And as well as not only being recognized nationally, but internationally as well, both in the new market and in the restoration market as well. Because true sustainability comes from restoring what we have, from minimizing our wastage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to touch up on a point that was said earlier, what did you do today? Right? That was the first question that was asked. Well, some of you might have taken the stairs instead of the elevator, those that are physically able. You might have turned off a light before you got here. But through the course of this panel, my hope and our hope collectively is to expose you and open you to the possibilities. And not just the possibilities, but diversification. And use your why, use your limb, use your story, use your background to get you to where you need to be. In my career, my job is not to convince people one way or another whether they want to be efficient or not. My job is to educate them so that they can make the best decision possible for what's right for the 3 Ps. I always think about it as the 3 Ps: people, planet, profit. And as long as those things are in order, and yes, they can all coincide. And I hope that our stories here can show you that you can use your passions, that you can use your background, that you can use all these things into a career in efficiency and in sustainability.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing tonight? Okay, so my name is Ruvi Mugara. I am originally from the country of Zimbabwe. It is a real country, everyone. It exists, not just in films. It is in Africa at the bottom, right above South Africa. Was born and raised there, and I moved to the province of Nova Scotia by playing a fun game of Spin the Globe. Ended up in Nova Scotia, never heard of it before. Showed up, was like, what is this white stuff on the ground? Why is this it exist? But I have made Nova Scotia my home, and I just have a really different story to a lot of the people here, where I have no technical knowledge when it comes to energy efficiency. I always say I stumbled into this career. I did psychology at St. Mary's University in Halifax. I loved psychology. I was actually sent here to do a sciences background, was failing, was like, what do I do? You know, like coming from an African background, we really believe, our families believe that either you're a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. Those are the careers, nothing else. So I was like, oh, what do I do? Like, I'm failing. And working in that industry puts a different perspective on life, because you realize just how fortunate you are as an able-bodied human being to just be alive and be present. So after having my son, I decided I needed a pivot in my career. And this organization that I work for now, Think Well Shift, they hired a girl with 0 skills in energy efficiency based on the fact that I could talk, and they needed someone who can talk and kind of break down that knowledge for youth. So I started off talking to kids in schools from grade primary all the way to grade 12 and university about energy efficiency, planting the seed in the younger minds, because it's easier to grow up with something that you already know than, that whole saying around, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So I started there, and then I kind of worked my way up, and now I'm the director of projects at Think Well Shift, where I now handle sort of like the management of the different teams and breaking down that technical jargon that all these guys here are going to be talking about, all those acronyms, so that the regular person can understand it. Because it's a lot of information being thrown at us right now, where Canada's headed to net zero, and the regular homeowner or the regular tenant is sitting in their house very confused as to what to do, where to start. They want to do the right thing, but they just don't know where to start. And so it's starting with those small behavior changes, such as turning off the lights when you leave the room, taking shorter showers, and praising people, and then eventually climbing that ladder of, okay, you're doing all these great things. Why not try to insulate your home better? Why not try to look into this? So that's like my my course of life, I think. I don't know.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Nikki Muswaggon. I am a young and Cree Indigenous woman. I am from Manitoba, northern Manitoba, but I'm currently residing in Winnipeg. I work as a level 3 electrician, going on to, well, level 3, 4 electrician. Right now, I'm currently doing a project management job and I do electrical as part-time. I stumbled upon that. Unfortunately, like it's a wild story. But yeah, so I'm here to just talk to you guys about my part in what I do for energy efficiency. We can go more. I'll go more into like my part in what they do and how both our jobs coexist with each other. So I hope you guys enjoy our panel and what we have to talk about.
Thanks, Nikki. Hi, everyone. My name's Shannon Giebelhaus. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, born and raised. And so I also sort of stumbled to where I am now on a bit of a winding path. I grew up in the oil and gas household. My dad was an engineer in the oil and gas field. So my very beginning jobs were following dad around with a clipboard and doing some checks with him through the pressure vessels. So that's where I grew up, and he actually encouraged me to go into clean energy at Alternative Energy Technology program in NATE. He said if he could do things over, he would go into the clean energy sector because that's where things are going. And I looked into it and I thought it was pretty amazing, really inspiring, and it was the first year of that program, so I thought, hey, why not be a guinea pig? So I took that program in 2013, graduated, and then I decided to go travel a bit. Decided I wanted to actually become an organic farmer instead, to my parents' great disappointment. So I did sustainable farming for a few years and gained a whole other appreciation for sustainability and what that means from a very, very literally grassroots level. I decided that I kind of still wanted to be able to eat food that I didn't just grow. So I decided I needed something else as well. Went into solar and decided that wasn't quite my vibe either, but an incredible career there. And then an elder in my life suggested I check out the energy advising role because NRCan had just announced a huge amount of funding going into energy advisor training about 3 or 4 years ago. So I started studying that and I thought, wow, this is literally going into people's homes. This is making an impact on the very basic scale, same as farming. People have to eat, people have to live in their houses. So it was exciting to me to engage with folks on a very personal level. Ended up doing business development with a service organization after that. And then now I find myself at the Clean Energy Improvement Program with Alberta municipalities in Alberta. And this is a program that encourages folks to do energy retrofits on their home. And I work with contractors. I'm a contractor management lead. And that means I just basically build relationships with contractors, homeowners in our program and help them navigate all the different steps that are required there. So I guess the point of all of that is to say that there is so many opportunities within the sector, and it's okay if it's not an A to B line. You're probably going to take a lot of winding paths, and that's okay.
Thanks for having me in a hybrid fashion. I guess COVID has helped us do this. So my name is Afaf Azzouz. I'm a senior manager at Deloitte under the Sustainability and Climate team. I live in Montreal. I'm a Canadian of Egyptian origin, so I've lived a huge chunk of my life in Egypt, actually. At Deloitte, I'm helping a lot of companies on a strategic level with their net zero implementation plans. And basically anything to do with energy efficiency and decarbonization of their portfolio of assets. That I'm quite lucky to have lived in multiple continents around the world, and so I've had the pleasure of designing buildings in the hottest climates and deserts of Egypt up until the coldest climates in northern Manitoba. So I feel like I'm quite privileged. It frankly all started with having a degree in architectural engineering in Cairo, and I kind of felt like they taught us really, really well how to design a building, how to think about form and space and function and what user needs are, and what are the general topics of sustainability. However, I was never able to quantify and really measure the impact of what I was designing and how big a window needs to be to actually get in the fresh air that you need to achieve the right comfort level. I lack that piece about like really intrinsic quantification of the impact of the work that I do. So I went off and studied in the UK and studied what they now call building performance engineering. Frankly, in Canada, energy efficiency is such a huge field that they didn't know what to call me. I wasn't a mechanical engineer. I wasn't an electrical engineer. I was just a buildings engineer because it's such a all-encompassing kind of field, so I would call myself the nerd that sits behind a laptop and really goes down into creating a digital twin of a building to figure out whether it's new or a retrofit, to figure out exactly what kind of measures give you the best return on your investment, will get you the best air quality, will give you the best daylight, will also reduce your emissions, and will do it in a very energy efficient approach. And I'm now slightly shifting gears towards, at my current role, I'm slightly shifting gears towards helping clients on a more strategic level to decarbonize their assets, their portfolios. So I'm not just focused on one building at a time or only homes. I've helped clients with fleet decarbonization with, airplanes, like supermarkets, industrial buildings, heritage buildings, what have you, because oftentimes we lack the bigger picture in terms of how much does this building weigh in terms of the bigger picture of an entire portfolio of assets of a company. And frankly, even if it is 18% greenhouse gas emissions, it ends up being something that is quite significant because it's where people live, it's where people operate, it's where all of the strategic decisions happen, and it's also some of the highest running costs in a portfolio of assets of a company. So I would say I'll end by saying that I'm quite passionate about converting any non-believer in energy efficiency into the believers. And the word decarbonization sometimes triggers me because I feel like we've lost the beauty of what is energy efficiency first, because energy efficiency is the core and decarbonization is the output towards the end. So thank you.
Okay, so wasn't that so much better them introducing themselves than me sitting and saying, well, in 2017, Afaf did, right? I thought that was really great. Thank you guys so much for showing the diversity of not just the people in the sector, but the work in the sector. So let's get down to our question. Energy efficiency contributes to the comfort and safety of our buildings, improving indoor air quality, as we mentioned, and increasing productivity for business, institutions, and industry. Please tell us how your work contributes to that. We'll start with Will.
You all know that I work in the physical space. In physical space meaning in homes, in commercial settings as well. And to my earlier point, we work based on education because whether the budget allows for it or not, we all ultimately have to rely on a number. And in order for the person, the individual, the stakeholder, the client, to be able to make that decision, it starts with the education. Education is power, and that's not just in the classroom. That applies in business, that applies in life. Why do you choose one car over another? Why do you choose one thing over another? It comes by having the knowledge. So part of my job that I do on a regular basis, in terms of the sustainability centers, there are many forms that takes place in the physical space. There's many standards that we can hit or try to apply or try to incorporate.
We have to convey the value of this stuff outside of carbon, outside of we're saving energy, you should do it, right? And so for me, it boils down to like 6 things, right? 3 R's, 3 S's, right? So the 3 R's are, keep in mind that people are making business decisions, right? And by doing decarbonization, there's a revenue opportunity. You can charge more, make more money because you're net zero. There's a revenue corridor associated with that, right? There's a return on the building. When you save $100,000 in a building, forget about the savings you get. That building is now worth $1 million more. Save $100,000 a year in energy, that building is automatically the next day worth $1 million more, right? Like same thing if you put solar panels on your house, it's worth more, right? The resiliency thing, like for us that have been talking about it and saying, that's kind of theoretical, you know, who's going to buy bodegas in New York now, right? With the storms and stuff like that. Resiliency and adaptation is a real thing, right? So those are the 3 R's, right? The 3 S's in the non-energy benefit space, I think, and people spend a lot of time trying to figure this out. It's like now, post-COVID, it's all about safety, right? You know, the health benefits associated with energy efficiency are huge, right? So when we start talking about energy efficiency, there's some health benefits associated with this stuff. There is always the savings of carbon, the savings of energy, the savings of money associated with it. But I think the one thing that socially hasn't had a lot of capital, but now, with all the Teslas riding around and stuff like that, is status. That person who put solar panels and the heat pump on their house, they're a cooler person. They really are. So the status benefits, none of this has to do with energy, but those sort of things, the resiliency benefits, the actual equity returns, the revenues that you get above and beyond the savings that you generate, and all the safety, health issues and stuff, you know, and add to the fact that you're now the cool kid on the block, yeah, that's a reason to do energy efficiency.
Maybe what I'll add, so the work that we do at the Atmospheric Fund is about accelerating retrofits. Today, what we're trying to do, I mean, this is in a way an old field, and you know, will retrofits work, and how do we do them? We have those answers, and we know the measures. So now it's about accelerating their uptake. And so, in a nutshell, we are looking at the implementation challenges. We are looking at the financing challenges. We are looking at the need for regulatory standards, equipment standards, to actually create clarity in the market so that we are all retrofitting buildings the same way, right? To the same depth. And some of the statistics that Natasha opened today's event with, you know, NRCan has a green building strategy. We can map out what vintage of buildings we should start at and the depth of the efficiency improvements and decarbonization measures or emissions reductions that we need to achieve. And so we're a little bit of a Swiss Army knife at the Atmospheric Fund, and we're trying to unblock those challenges and prove what's capable. But a big part of this is about the non-energy benefits, like the social impacts. That's what really excites me about this opportunity. I mean, when you're talking to the average person, you could talk about climate change and you could talk about energy, but this is their home, right? This is where they sleep. This is where they look after their families. These are their workplaces. And we spend, you know, one stat I want you to consider on the importance of this and the importance of a holistic mindset about these kinds of investments. We spend 90% of our time indoors, right? Even outdoor people spend 90% because this is where we live, work, and play. And so we shouldn't decouple energy efficiency from, in fact, we should start to multi-solve, right? That's a little bit of jargon in there, but we should be looking at things holistically. And so that's a sort of a snapshot of the work that we do in the space. But the other thing I want you to consider is that, you know, we're talking about homes, but we live in our country, in Canada, 1/3 of people rent their homes. And in cities, that's actually a higher number, it's closer to 50%. And in fact, that's the largest growing segment, renters. And so suddenly we have to think about who owns this building, who has agency over making these changes, who's going to make these improvements. And so it's time for us to also think about energy efficiency and in the context of these changes and the stakeholders that are involved that we need to engage to actually accelerate the change.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Let's hear from Afaf.
Perfect. Okay, so on my end, my focus is, as I'm now helping companies on a more strategic level, I help a lot with what they call ESG or environmental social governance. And if you've been following the news, you know, a lot of the public companies are now required to report on what they call the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or the TCFD reporting. And that's become mandatory for public companies. And so what has been realized, very interestingly, is that the value of a company and its financials is now inherently linked to climate and how this company deals with climate, full stop, as well as all the other governing issues around climate, like a just transition around like upskilling or reskilling, people going from the oil and gas industry into the clean energy sector, quote unquote. on the side of that, there is a huge notion around greenwashing. It's like every single company is actually publishing their sustainability report or their TCFD report or their ESG report, and what they're claiming and like how many jobs they've created or how many aspects around climate or decarbonization or whatnot is now becoming scrutinized, and it's being looked at, and everyone's under the radar, quote unquote. But how you link that in the strategic sense around a company is trying to aspire to attain all these different types of metrics. Energy efficiency is one of them that makes absolute business sense, because oftentimes when companies own or even lease different types of buildings or assets, they have a 5-year building management plan anyways, and they have to upgrade the equipment because it's running out of life. And so one thing that I guess I didn't hear within the answers is that yes, there are cost savings, yes, there are climate considerations around greenhouse gas emissions, but it has to be done anyways. Buildings will have to be lived in anyways, and it doesn't only increase the value of the building, but it also extends the asset life in a way that makes sense. So a lot of the times when I'm advising my clients, I try to speak their language to see it's a no-brainer exercise. Even if your CEO doesn't care about XYZ, they will care about reducing the energy consumption, because it's one of your biggest energy bills anyways, or your building's going to deteriorate anyways, and you're going to have to think about a new lease agreement.
If we were to put the built environment in more practical terms, this is something that we quickly realized during the COVID pandemic. And that's that of the 90% of the time indoors, it wasn't just during COVID, it's in general for the most part. And one of the things that I want to point out with that is two things. One is ASHRAE 55, thermal comfort. And I also want to point out the WELL standard. So the WELL standard started in 2011 as a way to make buildings, our enclosures, work for us. Because for a long time, yes, we used them for a place of rest, a place to sleep. But when the WELL standard came out, it said, what else can they do? How can our built structure work for us? Is it going to make us healthier? Is it going to make us think better? Is it going to make us live longer? And they looked at all this data from medical experts throughout the world, and they say, how can we incorporate this now into the efficiency of the particular structure? So piggybacking off the LEED standard, they then led forth their WELL initiative. And what does this mean? How does this come into play to the in layman's term, for the average homeowner? Take, for example, the stat that was given earlier of the 26 degrees. 26 degrees, you might as well be in the tropics. That's a very high temperature. What happens at that point? You may say, well, I get cold easily. That may be true. What is thermal comfort to you? It's personal. But you have to understand how the building envelope, how the place that you live in works. If you're now heating up that space to that temperature, are your windows insulated enough where they're not going to condensate and create other problems, which translate into health problems? And this is where things like the WELL standard, LEED standards, and all these different standards come into place, where you have to look at it from a very holistic way when you're thinking about energy efficiency. It's not just about how much am I saving on my bills. No. What kind of impact am I having on myself and my family with this? WELL standard, when it first originated, was only commercial, because one of the incentives that most commercial properties and businesses used to have, say, hey, you work for me, I'll give you a gym membership. I want you to be healthier. I want you to live longer. Well, WELL standard took it beyond that. How is this lighting? Is this lighting efficient? Yes, no? Is it making you more proficient in your job? Is it making you think clearly? And how much healthier are you being in a holistic way if I spend my money on the structure versus on the things that you can do? And I was fortunate enough to be on the advisory to not just take the WELL standard from the commercial sector, but apply it into WELL homes. So that same standard is now available to your home, so that you can also benefit from that in the place that you spend the most time in, and no longer in the place that you spend 8, 10, 12 hours in some cases, but where you spend the rest of your time in.
Thank you so much for adding that, Will. Let's go to the benefits. So we're talking about building performance. You have to design the building and then you have to construct the building. So what are the benefits of applying building performance analysis? So why should we, include building performance analysis in the building design process? Let's start with Yash.
Sure, thank you. First of all, when you look at everything from a holistic point of view, you need a benchmark to start off. And the data analytics gives you that benchmark, whether it may be through how much energy does this type of building consume, to how much energy does this region consume. The coarser or the finer granularity between the data set could be extrapolated from that baseline. Now I'm talking about baseline. It may occur to you as this is the baseline just for energy consumption. Not really. It could be a baseline for simple as temperature, water quality, anything like that. We need a baseline. And us advocating for building analytics gives you that baseline. And to further to that, it also allows you to develop materials and develop processes that are effective, that are soundproof, that validates the work of 10 years, probably 20 years before us, sometimes even much more than that, right? So those are data analytics, and that's how we need to empower our policies as well, which we'll for sure get into during this conversation.
Thank you so much. Do you have something for her?
Yeah, to me, looking at building performance is really taking the guessing out of the equation and really following the principles of building science, right? It's beginning with the end in mind so that you don't end up somewhere you don't want. We put so much detail into our buildings, and I'd say architectural wise, where's this door going? Where's this window going? Where's the tile we're choosing? But why don't we put the same amount of effort into the building performance, which really, as Will was saying, it's not just about energy efficiency, it's about comfort, health, and so much more. So that's my take on it.
Thank you so much. Shannon?
Yeah, actually, I just want to go right off of what Fellipe was saying, because from my perspective, it's more of the retrofit side, so not so much a new building, but we have to do the same thing with an existing house. We have to find out where they are at now, so then we can make a really good plan for how to improve their house in the future. And a lot of folks can't do an entire retrofit to go straight to net zero. That's tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So creating a plan for them that makes sense, that is house as a system style design, so to speak. So it's still the same concepts of design heavy up front, do the planning, make it make sense for the homeowner on a bit of a roadmap, so that they can do the retrofits that make the most difference over time, if it has to be done over time. I think that's all I got.
Basically, building performance analysis, I have to say, with the millions and millions of tools that are out there, they are just tools. And so if not to diminish their impact, I am an energy modeler by training, so I highly believe in tools. but they are tools that help us make decisions, and they need to be tweaked. So I just wanted to start off by saying that. Having said that, they are vital tools for the decision-making process, and it's for pre-planning. You can't make. There are some streamlined decisions that you can make without having a building performance analysis tool, but that comes with a lot of experience and with some streamlining. For the rare cases where building performance analyses are highly required, it's for those business cases that you can't really decide on. There's two key priorities that a client, or limited budget, or two different systems that you can't really decide between. That's the time where energy performance analysis is highly useful. And I remember, I'll give you a quick anecdote. I used to help calibrate building energy models, i.e. digital twins of existing heritage buildings or very complex federal government buildings. And there was a time where I managed to calibrate the energy model to an hourly level. So we managed to match the utility data of an existing building to its digital twin in an energy simulation software. And we're like, okay, let's go out, let's party, let's do this, because it took me like a very long time to actually be able to calibrate it. And the impact that it shows, that you can then use that super powerful tool to say, this is an actual replica of the building in question. And if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can very easily convince your client of why it costs that way, why its impact is more important than another measure, and how it feeds into a larger portfolio as well. Thank you.
I was so proud to say, I learned my lesson. I know when to talk on the mic now. Okay, don't speak too soon. Okay, so let's move a little bit into career journeys. There's tens and thousands of people working in energy efficiency, hundreds of thousands, and there's going to be so many more jobs available by 2030. What does that mean? How can you mid-career transfer into this industry? How can you, if you're coming from a different country and have a degree and you want to implement that here, how can you do that without going through 4 years of school? You can actually do that within energy efficiency with some of the trainings that are available. So the question is, what have your career journeys looked like in the EE sector? Everybody said they've come here somehow through surprise element, right? What transferable skills have you taken with you into your current position now? Let's start it off with Nikki.
I didn't really start off in the energy efficiency sector. At the beginning, I kind of went to school for 4 years at the U of M. I started with my Bachelor of Science, and I figured, going for pre-med wasn't for me, so I kind of switched up my career in the long run. Then I noticed that I wasn't really for that, so I moved back to my home community, not knowing what to do. So I got the opportunity to work in economic development, and that's what kind of started me off, where I was like kind of exploring different careers. And they sent me out to school, and I ended up going in for business admin, and I got bored of that as well. I know, a lot of career changes. So anyways, I got bored of that as well. So I ended up working with multiple different companies. I still look young, but I got my experience in multiple different sectors, and then I ended up going to school with my younger brother. He was scared to go to school, didn't know what he wanted to do, so I offered to go to school with him, which was an electrical trade, and I ended up excelling more than him. So I moved past him, and he's still kind of behind because he ended up having a baby, and he just took the time to help his partner out with their baby, and I excelled higher than him. So I think he's waiting for me to become a journeyman so he can be my apprentice, which is kind of hilarious. But yeah, and then working in the sector, I just started learning about energy efficiency, and I'm super proud of where I'm at right now, and I'm still learning to this day about what I can do to help help people, especially homeowners and companies, how they can improve the energy efficiency within their company or even their homes.
Sure. So I'll give you some context around personal outside just educational background. So I love to talk, always love to talk. I'm not a very confident speaker. I've always said I just talk. I just information is just spewing out of me. So I was my background was debate champion in high school. And so the love of talking was how do I do that as a career? And then with psychology, I was like, okay, behavior change, psychology, people, how do I make this into a feasible career and get paid for just talking? How do I do this? So I ended up coming to this organization and talking to youth. I love kids, so it was really easy to break down those barriers with kids and just being okay, all right, how many of you know how awesome the earth is and what can we do to protect the earth? And kids are so passionate and so excited, and they're just so easy to talk to. It made me even more passionate, and I was like, how do I transfer these skills to adults? Kids are so easy. Adults, on the other hand, that's a whole different ball game. So I was like, what do I do? How do I tackle adults? How do I give the same passion to adults? Especially because as adults, everything we think of has a monetary value. So it's harder for us to make decisions because of the monetary value. We're constantly thinking financially. Kids don't think that way. They don't have that pressure yet. They're just excited. So I try to take that and then apply it to adults and working with adults. And so I just really cared a lot about people, and I value what people have to say and what their thoughts are. And so when I go and I consult with someone, I'm not just like coming to spew information at them to make sure that they pick all the retrofits and get everything done and, you know, spend all this money. I'm listening to them and really trying to understand what drives you, what motivates you. Some people, like I always say, if they really don't care about the environment, I am not going to judge them on that. I want to know why are they doing this? Why are they even interested? Okay, I want to save some money on my power bill. That's awesome. Saving some money on your power bill in the end leads to you caring about the environment. I'm not going to be bashing people about their thoughts or their beliefs or their ideas, although that's where I'm trying to direct them. I'm meeting them where they're at. And those are skills that I've had from like my background that I've now applied to my job now. So like I said, I do not have the technical background. I'm learning as I go, just like Nikki. And the more I learn, the more passionate I become about it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to share this with the homeowner. I can't wait to share this with the tenant, because I am completely with them. I understand how complicated everything is around this net zero stuff, and it is a really big mountain to climb. And if we are confused by it, I can't even imagine what it's like for a regular person to be confused by it.
Well, I think one of those things that we don't realize throughout our life is every single thing we do, we learn skills. And I think I'd love to, begin my story way before things got even technical. I grew up in a low-income household. By grade 1, my dad decided to start his own business, and I kind of watched that and learned little skills throughout my whole life that I never thought would actually turn out to be useful way later. At a young age, I knew how to invoice through QuickBooks. Yeah, it does. My dad, on weekends, if machines weren't working, we would be the ones going in, getting our hands dirty, figuring out how to fix it, because we couldn't afford a technician to come do it. And you know what? Throughout my whole life, I never knew what I was going to do. But what's interesting is on my mom's side, strong, brown woman leader, I saw her in a very high leadership role and actually jump, accelerate, and actually one of the VPs that led to her developments. And I got to see that whole change kind of pan out as a strong brown woman. But what's interesting is I think the one thing they always said is go do med, typical brown story. And I, right? It's hilarious. And then I was like, the one thing I'm gonna do is not do med. And I went into engineering at McMaster. Jumping a few steps into there, as I said, I started my own businesses, VXV Solutions, both technical and business oriented. And I think Will was the one who was coming in. He's like, I don't understand. You're very technical, but you also have a sales background. Those don't usually overlap. Even sales engineers only go so far. And I think it just has to do with having a lot of various skills throughout my life that slowly built on each other. On the consulting side, I got to see you actually use building code, design, ended up implementing the largest wireless lighting controls network within first year as a junior, not realizing how big of a deal that was, and then teaching the engineering firm about wireless lighting controls. And then becoming applications, and then going very, very deep into lighting that I never thought I would know, circadian rhythm, you name it, I could actually list it. I think within Canada, there's probably about 3 people, maybe 5, that know how much I know about lighting controls technology. But then eventually, I was like, I want something more. I want something different. Applied to a couple jobs, want something different. Got a management role that I wasn't expecting, managing a bunch of sales engineers, or sales overall, across North America, about 600 people. Just handed it to me, no leadership experience, no nothing. And I was like, all right, gonna have to figure this out. Biggest skill there was actually empathy. not the one that people would think, but in middle of COVID, while everyone's trying to struggle, figure out how to get jobs, actually understanding their needs and actually curating different solutions around that was the biggest thing. And a couple months later, I got the call from one of our manufacturers overseas today and said, hey, we need something different in Toronto. We need something to penetrate, introduce new technology. Things exist in Europe. Can you help us? And that's what launched VXV Solutions. And the reason I said that whole journey was because there was never one skill that made the most sense. It was never being fully technical. It was never being sales. It was never knowing how to push an invoice out of QuickBooks. It was the accumulation of all of that. And I think every single person here has their own story to tell. And you don't realize the skills you have until you kind of look back and realize, oh, I did this, so I learned something new. And that's my little journey.
Absolutely. That's why we have skill sets. It's multiple. We are not uniskilled people. Thank you very much. Next up, we have a question that we're going to go to speaking about clean tech exports. So energy efficiency is one of Canada's clean tech exports and can attract new industries into Canada. Please speak to the exciting advancements that are currently happening in your work that the general public may not be aware of. Let's start with Abi.
So I can speak a little bit more. I think we obviously in Canada, we've achieved quite a bit in terms of clean tech today. What's interesting is I believe in collaboration wholeheartedly, whether that's companies in America discovering things, whether that's companies overseas. Sometimes those technologies that have created something 11 years ago, 15 years ago, that just didn't know how to enter the North American market and we're happy. But today there's a need for that. There's a whole different set of needs, requirements, building codes. How do we get things more energy efficient? How do we develop different things? I always say this, I think one of those things that actually pushes innovation is usually the fear of losing jobs. Similar how we hear AI today, people are scared of losing their jobs. It's not necessarily the introduction of AI, it's the guy who knows how to use AI. Similar to that vein, there's also new technologies coming in. There's new training programs being developed. One of those things that we're doing, more specifically, is learning how to bring in a lot more sophisticated lighting control systems. But what's cool about that is, at the end of the day, to deploy them, we still need boots on the ground, hands getting dirty, understanding how to install things, running those things. Lighting controls, an aux sensor can do 3-wire communication to a power pack. 3 wires? Very easy to wire them up wrong. We still need everyone to do those things, and I think that's one of those things that you don't realize. Though there's different jobs being created, there's also an entirely new space being created as technologies develop and create a market for themselves.
I think the thing that is exciting me right now is that clean tech is actually a thing. It's not just some nebulous thing like green, right? Clean tech has a designation under ISED, which is Innovation, Science, Economic Development Canada, and they've done the math, and there's like 200,000, 300,000 energy efficiency jobs, but in the umbrella of clean tech, there's 700,000 jobs, more than oil and gas, like all that stuff, right? And it speaks to the range of what you can do. Like, we do a lot of workforce development stuff, and people are like, okay, I want to be an environmental engineer or a clean tech person. What does that mean? And it means that, you can be a clean tech person in the built environment, doing really cool stuff like AI in the architecture, engineering, construction sector. You can do some really cool stuff in finance and impact analysis and risk stuff. That's some of the stuff that is happening, either technologies that are being exported or actual careers that are advancing here. I would say that, regardless of how you see yourself, what is your sweet spot of what I'm passionate about, whether it's infrastructure like on charging stations and generation and stuff like that, and saving like distributed energy resources like renewables and buildings, right? Whether it's stuff like geothermal and ground source heat pumps, whether it's stuff like municipal stormwater drainage and stuff like that, whether it's things like in transit and electric vehicles, all of these things is where Canada is becoming pretty specialized and really good at this stuff. And there's a lot of money and incentives to either build it internally and also to export all of those technologies out there. So don't think of efficiency as, you know, this is the one thing that you do. It's in any sector that you want to go in, even agriculture, right? You can find energy efficiency careers, and whether it's locally here or exportable stuff because you can travel the globe and sell it anywhere, right? That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I truly echo what Abhi and Kirk were essentially saying, is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And through a lot of work that needs to be done, there involves a lot of people. But there are also tangible outcomes that could happen, right? Very specifically, let's look at mass timber, for example. 10 years ago, very few of us were talking about it. Right now, that's the next biggest thing. In fact, a lot of projects are being developed such that it helps mass timber to be the prime product to be used. For example, to achieve carbon zero efficiency and carbon zero emission factors and things like that. But in addition to that, that puts us at a very niche market space where we are allowed to actually build material within Canada and export it down south. There's a possibility of that, right? All of these, all of these different spaces, people can actually find opportunities and develop their own material within it, whether that may be through developing a material that is A, sustainable, going to carbon zero, or B, that may be through providing infrastructure or jobs. So, and jobs and infrastructure is something else that Canada is excelling at an exponential level, right? So these are some things that upskilling and whole 9 yards, like this question cannot be answered in 5-10 minutes, but I'm trying to. So that's where I would believe that that's where we're headed. Like there's a space for everyone to either produce, import, export, and actually get Canada back on the market for clean tech.
You mean we can't talk about all the global issues in the world in our 2-hour panel? Really? Someone's got to do it. You guys are doing an excellent job at that. I know, Fatima, you wanted to bring a social procurement aspect to this.
Yeah, we talk a lot about technology, and there's a lot in technology and there's a lot of design and engineering, but one of the advancements that I'm really excited about has this complicated name. It's a simple concept, social procurement. So in Canada, the construction industry is about $150 billion annually. And, today we talked a lot about building retrofits, which is taking an existing building and improving its performance. And Pembina Institute estimates that to retrofit all of our buildings and achieve net zero by 2050, we would be spending $10 to $15 billion annually to do that work. And what's really awesome about this area of opportunity is that no matter the national standards you have, the national programs you have, and all of that, at the end of the day, these are buildings in neighborhoods and communities, and the work has to get done in the building, in those neighborhoods and communities and business districts. And so no matter how big and broad the goals are, the work ends up being highly localized. And so the question is, with that kind of economic opportunity, where are those dollars going? Who's benefiting from that opportunity? Who can soak up that money? And so procurement is about purchasing, right? Procurement is about getting the right product at the right price for the right quality with good certainty that you're going to have it when you need it, or the right services when you need it. Social procurement, maybe you've heard of sustainable procurement, is about green purchasing standards, about putting that in your RFP and asking, okay, what are the environmental attributes of the goods or services you're providing? And increasingly, but not enough yet, in construction, even in the work that we do at the Atmospheric Fund, we are putting in social expectations. Who are you going to hire? Who are you going to subcontract? And that is a really exciting advancement, which is not technical. It's in business decision making. It's in prioritizing certain values and saying the work has to get done. Let's hire people from the local neighborhood. We work with Toronto Community Housing at the Atmospheric Fund. We have quantifiable goals around hiring residents for entry-level work. And so this is just a really, sort of practical, non-technical example of some of the innovation opportunities that are in the kind of work we do. Change making can be as cool software and AI. Sometimes it's just an improved prioritization and values. So I just wanted to share that as an example of one of the advancements that I'm really excited about.
in recent conversations with someone who has a work visa, doing a master's, what are we doing to help people who don't fit the easy to hire box in Canada, who don't have PR, who are not citizens, but they're here, they're ready, and they're willing, and they are already upskilling by doing masters, by taking courses.
If I, yeah, if I can jump on it real quickly, I'm just going to clarify that they're willing to work, period. That's the bottom line. And, yes, we are getting a large influx within the sustainability sector that in some cases are just as, if not better trained than what we do have here at home. Take, for example, I'm going to use Afaf. She was trained in Egypt, and her journey was a little bit different. But one of the things that we're doing, especially in the construction world, when it comes to efficiency and the job shortage, and I'm applying it to myself because this is my area, I personally have been in many, many conversations with the city at my level, because every voice counts. And I sit on many boards with the city and both with the building authorities here in Toronto. And that is an ongoing conversation. Unfortunately, it takes, he who doesn't scream doesn't get the milk, as they say. And it takes a lot of screaming in order for policy to adjust to the needs of the market right now. And me personally, what kind of change am I doing personally at my level is that I deal with a lot of those students on work visas. And I make it a point that, yes, I will give any Canadian a fair shot, because that is our main purpose, right? We don't want to take jobs from home. But the reality is that you have to be realistic who is better qualified and who actually feels the need for the specific role that you need them to.
And I think I'll actually jump in on that as well. I think the most important thing is also understanding what that person wants to do and trying to get skills to aim towards that. Sometimes it's hard to just maybe find your first job, getting your feet wet. But there's always going to be certain skills that people don't realize that they need. I went super niche. I went into lighting. That's a handful of people actually go as deep as I did. But I either trained myself or I took courses. I mean, on the side, while I was kind of doing a lot of my applications engineering, I want to understand what architecture was. So I actually took a couple courses at architecture just to understand, because that was the people I'm working with. Though looking back, I think it adds to those skills. And when you're in an interview or you're just going from door to door knocking, like, hey, I have these skills. Are you guys looking for work? Is there any way I can assist you? Those are things you can showcase. So it kind of goes both ways, because I think there's always going to be interesting jobs on the table. It's a matter of finding them. One of the things that my fiance does fairly well is reaching out to people on LinkedIn, connecting with them on virtual coffee chats to understand the companies, kind of what they're going and what jobs are available, and do I want to kind of jump into that role? And that's kind of what you can do.
Thank you so much. And it's a topic that it's a sensitive, complicated topic when we're talking about jobs in Canada. But I'll tell you one thing that I see, it's time and time again in these newcomer communities that are willing to take a chance, that are willing to pivot, that are willing to try something new. And it shows, it's there, it's tangible, and we will see that trend within energy efficiency as well. So going back to some of the exciting things that are happening within clean tech, things that you guys might not be aware of, one of the things that really sparked my interest was 3D printing houses. Now, they're not the most carbon efficient way, as we were speaking today about designing houses, but when you're talking about places like California or Texas, where homelessness is, immense, and a place like Texas, where they never thought that the temperatures would reach those levels, it's very interesting to know that there are solutions right now in terms of creating better housing structures for those who are vulnerable. Does Fellipe, do you want to take a stab at this as well and talk about some of the advancements that are taking place in your part of the sector?
Yeah, sure. And my part is, I'm in retrofits, right? I'm a builder. I'm in retrofits, and what I do right now is more bespoke retrofits. So it's one-of-ones. Every building is different. Every building needs a unique solution to it. and that's not really scalable. So what I find very exciting right now is some initiatives that are trying to scale these retrofits in a panelized way. So an exterior panelized retrofits that could really lead or bring us to a mass retrofit that we're trying to achieve. Some initiatives like Recover, Reconstruct, and Retrofit Canada are really doing great work on that.
If I can just add two cents into that, you mentioned the 3D printing is very carbon heavy. We know that. And my journey started in ICF construction, insulated concrete forms, heavy on the carbon footprint. But I want you to think of Canada as the little engine that could. There's a lot of great innovation and a lot of great tech coming out of Canada. Yes, that came from the States. But guess what came from Canada? Reduced carbon concrete. There's a company out of Montreal called Carbon Cure, for those of you that want to look into it, that's actually taking a lot of recycled CO2, infusing it into the concrete without diminishing its properties. And then you're then able to make concrete. It's not going to go away anytime soon. I'm going to be like the spy versus spy with here against the timber production. Why? Because we have to be realistic. Same like oil and gas they're not going to go away anytime soon. Neither is concrete. In order to build higher structures, we need the strength of concrete for a lot of those instances. So there's a lot of great tech coming out of Canada, and concrete is one of them. And it's a start.
So we're going to combine two questions together. So yes, stable, skilled, purposeful jobs will improve the economic, social, and environmental health of local communities. We know this in theory. EE is on its way to becoming a very high growth sector. How are you all, and we can just sort of start from the end and come down, right? And then we'll end with Afaf. How are you connecting the dots between what you do and the communities you belong to? What kind of footprint are you, non-carbon footprint, are you currently building or that you would like to see in this work? We'll start from Shannon and we'll just come down.
Yeah, so from my perspective as someone working with a program, what I'm hoping is to see the knowledge of homeowners increase from like, what the heck am I doing? What is this program? How do I do it? To I look forward to the time when they're coming to us saying like, hey, I know about the heat pump and I know about the solar. I have a couple other things I want to get done. I want to access your financing. How do I do it? Like, I look forward to those conversations where the homeowner is so engaged and so aware of what's going on that they kind of already know what kind of journey they are expecting. Right now, there's a lot of like tons of conversations like Ruvi's doing about just education, just like telling them that there actually is something going on and they can do better. A lot of that is just like convincing them and letting them see that. So I look forward to those conversations evolving.
I'll go off that as well. Well, like in my position as an electrician, and when the homeowners or the companies are in and they have questions, like, you know, me as an electrician being physically there, doing the real life application, like I have the opportunity to sit down with these people where I can actually show them and like teach them how to improve like whatever they need in their houses. So say like just light bulbs, plugs. Yeah, just kind of giving them different examples of how they could save on like their energy bills and like for what kind of new applications are coming around. Just from learning from these people, learning from this panel, like they have such great opportunities within their programs that I can, well, because we're all from different provinces and every province has their own different programs. And then with my province, I know there's like tons of opportunities out there for people to like learn. And so like I'm still learning, like I said previously. So I'm still studying out there, studying and teaching the people that I work for just better ways to improve their houses, their energy efficiency bills, and just giving them knowledge. As you can tell, we're like Manitoba's still learning about how to be more energy efficient. Just because most of our power is like hydroelectric dams, and most First Nation. I work with First Nations communities, a lot. And like right now, we're all kind of slowly learning about solar power farms. So that's kind of it right now for all, like for Indigenous communities. And there's a handful of Indigenous communities that are already taking those steps, and they already have some solar farms installed. And in my community, that's what we're kind of like leaning towards right now. So that's my opportunity to go home and install that with the help of people in my community, where I can help teach them how to install that as well.
Okay, so for myself, I'm a bit of an oddball because I fall into two different like categories. I am an immigrant and a newcomer to Canada, even though I've been here for years. And I am also a Nova Scotian. Never left Nova Scotia since I got there. Landed in Nova Scotia, stayed in Nova Scotia. So I fit into two bubbles. I can relate to the newcomers. I understand what it's like when you ask the question about immigrants and work permits and visas. I was that person. It is a struggle to infiltrate the workforce as an immigrant. So I know all the struggles, and I feel like, I work with fishermen, I work with miners in Nova Scotia, very small communities, rural communities. And so trying to really instill just the effects of energy efficiency in these communities is my passion, and getting them to understand that it's just something that can be a part of their everyday lives, so that eventually they get to the net zero is my goal. So I feel like I just have so much to give and so much to offer, and I'm learning, and I want to make sure that I pass that message along to everyone I come across. I go to events for immigrants, we have the Nova Scotia Community College in Nova Scotia, and I will do networking events, talk to immigrant students who want to do this but are terrified because they're like, well, I gotta wait, 2 years for my PR and my permanent resident. And then, what am I gonna do for those 2 years? And just sitting them down and being like, okay, it's not the ideal world, but you can volunteer, you can network, you can start getting to know employers. And then using that same information and passing it on to the fishermen and being like, yeah, you're out on the water for months fishing, but imagine what that's like if you get home to a really warm house, versus coming home and then, you're wondering about, oh, how am I going to afford my power bill next month? So I have various conversations all the time, and I just want to make sure that by the end, in the next 10 years, I just harness it all into one conversation, if that makes any sense at all.
In hopefulness, and the other one in practicality. For many years now, I've been a fan of European trade shows. Why? Because it's interesting. I would go there and watch. I just sit there and watch homeowners having very technical conversations about the performance of their home. And they would have as detailed conversations as HVAC technicians would have here at a trade level. As a homeowner, they can have those conversations. So why do I say it as hopefulness? Because my hope is that we as Canadians can get to that level where there is awareness of usage and direct correlation to the consequences of that use, that we can actually apply that in a very tangible way. And at a practical level, because you may say, well, that's great, we can all hope for a lot of things, right? But what is the practicality? So for me, I can only apply for myself. I work in the built environment. And sometimes I don't get to do the things that I want to do, or that the homeowner should maybe do, or that client. But I have to step away from that and realize that I have to have an impact. I have to have an outlet. And my outlet is to go and reach out to the community. Go and teach whoever I can, whether it's a mentee, whether it's to volunteer in a program, whether it's to teach at a university, so that I can plant that seed for the future generations. I may not see it, and I don't need to see it. I can only pray and hope that the next generation does better than we did.
There's still left for me to say, I guess. No, 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 no. I meant just like the experiences on this panel is, it's outstanding. But where I come along, I think there are two folds to the story, and I'll speak to education sector because that's where I live and breathe most of the air. So looking at few of the undergrad students over here, they have a very unique opportunity, and that is through enhancing the resources out there, whether that may be NRC, that may be MyTax, that may be different types of NSERC funding, CERC funding, things like that. You can actually make an impact, whether you believe it or not. Getting those fundings actually make your research a lot more validated. And there are companies willing to partner with institutions to harness these skills. So it gives you a really wide opportunity. And right now, it's the time to move into the market, in my opinion, as a student, to actually take the risk and learn as much as possible and be one of strong pillars that the future generations can build upon. And the second way that I'll answer it is bringing the hands-on experience back into the classroom. Theoretically, we have done excellent in terms of engineering-wise. I think that we have done quite well when you look right across the board. But to bring the practical experience without having to go through a co-op program is where the next generation is where it's at. And that's what I try to focus most of my course content on, is real life case studies. How can I bring real life institutions back into the classroom, whether that may be through SDGs, whether that may be through online resources. And trust me, COVID has actually prepared students really well for virtual classrooms, where you don't need to be in the same province, not even the same country to teach. Like for example, I taught a couple of students across Europe over the last 4 months. It's been a transformation, and people are accepting that. So this is something that I look forward to on a day-to-day basis.
It's a global application, the work that we're doing, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, for being able to keep it short, actually, I'll share with you guys a quote that's really the ethos of myself and my company. It's from Winston Churchill. So we shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us. So if we treat our buildings that we live and work in the right way, it will have a direct repercussion on society. That's how I think.
That's a Obama mic drop quote. Okay, thanks for that. I gotta follow up that. Okay, so I do market transformation, I do programs, so I'm gonna go a little different. Like, my community is GTA, Ontario, Canada kind of thing, right? And I've worked in a lot of sectors with a lot of people, and what I've learned is that there is not one silver bullet. We are all super passionate about one thing, and the thing that I want to leave you with is embrace the diversity of opportunities here. This is not a silver bullet. This is all about silver buckshot, right? So cool quote, but what do you mean, man, right? I think people are coming here because they want to understand where are the jobs, where are the projects, where are things coming, right? And if you asked me a year ago, I might have been cynical, but now there's a whole bunch of transparency on stuff. So, if you're thinking decarbonization and that's where you want to be, I want to reduce carbon in the planet, I think the programs for the carrots, like the incentive programs, and even the sticks like the National Building Code, the feds are where you want to look. There's a lot of dollars being focused federally, NRCan, et cetera, on decarbonization. And if you look to the south of the border, which is usually a good predictor of things to come, there's a $370 billion biggest ever climate package. So maybe Canada's 40 billion, right? But that's a thing, right? There's dollars in the system coming through the pipeline. If your angle is resiliency, right? And I want to do something about adaptation and stuff like that, then I think the dollars and the projects and the workforce opportunities are on what Afaf was talking about with ESG. The investors are driving resiliency, mostly because they see what happens in New York and they're like, I don't want to be owners of those buildings underwater, right? So they are really dropping down heavy things to make sure the resiliency is there. And there's real opportunities, both technically and financially, on ESG and resiliency. If electrification, if heat pumps and EV charging and EV cars are kind of where you're all about, I think that the province, irrespective of which province, they're big, all of them are big on electrification, switching from natural gas into electric, whether it's fossil fuels in the vehicles or, space heating type of thing, right? That's a big driver, and there's a lot of provincial dollars associated with electrification. So that's where you want to look for the programs and the opportunities and the jobs, right? If you're kind of a nerd or like me, whatever, and AI is your trigger, right? That's your dopamine hit. Then, I said, right? Innovation Science, Economic Development Canada, they are on the forefront. They want to make Canada quantum computer land. They want to make it clean tech land. There is a lot of workforce development, $250 million to be clear, set aside for clean tech and disruptive technology innovation from ISED. And if you're doing anything in AI, those are the people you want to look at, right? If you're talking about stuff on the municipal lens, I care about my city and that sort of stuff, C40 kind of stuff. The triggers there, almost every kind of C40 city, the municipality, just Google C40, they have a stick in their Toronto Green Standard stuff or their existing building emission penalties that kick in like New York, right? So that's coming. Penalties for not building or not operating existing buildings efficiently with carbon, right? That stuff is, look at the municipalities on that, right? I'm seeing the hook, right? Don't worry, I'm almost done. And then the last thing is smart grid, right? If you're all about the electrons and I want to demand response and energy storage and all that kind of stuff, the utilities are where you want to look at, right? The local distribution companies and even, I'd say the local distribution companies, the hydro utilities in your municipalities and in your provinces, that's where you want to look for the DSM, demand side management programs or decarbonization programs. That's where that stuff is. So, decarbonization, resiliency, electrification, AI, municipal programs, and smart grid, that's dreams, right? So that clean tech dream or clean tech dreams, they're all available to you. And a year ago, I'd be more cynical, but now I'm pretty hopeful.
Awesome.
Go get it.
Kirk covered everything.
And for Kirk's TED Talk, you can go to www.
They're all haters, man.
Maybe the way I'll answer this question, sometimes when I tell people what I do or the sector I work in, they're like, oh, I want to work on something. I want to work on climate. I want to work on efficiency. And I hope one of the things you've taken away is that that work spans sectors. It spans fields and it spans skill sets. And so bring that lens into whatever personal, professional passion you pursue. It belongs there, right? You could be in business, you could be in policy, you could be in advertising, but you can apply this priority to your work. It's probably, you'll probably be surprised. I often, something I live by and I often encourage people to think about is live in the way you want the world to work, right? Work in the way you want the world to work. Be the spark in the room. Bring this up in those conversations and in those meetings, because I can guarantee there will be someone who nods when you bring it up. And so no matter where your path takes you, I hope you remember that and you continue to prioritize that, because we all need to be working on this. We all have a role to play and we can play it.
All right, I'll take a completely different perspective from everyone here and actually tie this down to identity and passion. Actually, my fiance, I think one of our first dates, one of the things I did was actually walk through Toronto and point to all the buildings that I've worked on. And I realized I've touched on at least one building on every street because of pure volume. But one of those things is that it's just seeing something that you work on come to life and actually exist is something beautiful on its own. And my fiance lives in Montreal and I live here, and she's like, where are we gonna live? I was like, definitely Toronto, because this is home. And the reason I had pointed to identity was because I come from an immigrant family that was displaced from a country that was hit by civil war and genocide worldwide. We have over 300,000 Tamil Canadians across Canada. London actually being the second biggest hub. But what I realized was one of the things along this drive was of building many things was actually making this beautiful country home. And if I can actually work to make it sustainable and green for my fellow immigrants and people who have also come here, then why not? And I hope you guys also look to kind of doing something similar as well.
I'll say maybe one thing. I always keep saying that, I feel like I've done my contribution to this world, given my contribution to this world when we as specialists are no longer being labeled as specialists, and like everything becomes inherently energy efficient and everyone speaks the language, and the lingo is like it is in the person dealing with HR matters, it's in the person who's dealing with procurement or suppliers, it's in the person who's sitting down behind the desk and like doing some fancy experiments for like new advancements in technologies. So that's a day where I feel like, okay, we've really truly have delivered our purpose, I guess. You see that from the panel of the 10 people that are sitting here. A lot of us have actually stumbled onto this field. It wasn't very purposeful. It's just like kind of happened and we were drawn into it. So that it only goes to say that there's so many opportunities for so many people out there to join the field as well. So think about any, I'm like a board member for the Association of Energy Engineers, for instance, or there's so many venues and outlets that you can try and be a part of that can start initiating your journey into the energy efficiency sector and the high performance building sector. And then, one of the things you're seeing as well on the corporate level side of things is that we now have something called the CSO, or the Chief Sustainability Officer, which is freakishly amazing because that never used to be on the C-suite. It never hit that level of strategic decision making. You're always down at the bottom of the operations level. So the fact that we have that means that the growth of the sector and the economy and the way anyone is trying to get into this sector. One of the things, after I graduated in my architectural engineering degree, I decided to pursue a very different kind of path that a lot of architectural students didn't do. Basically, I went from someone who was designing a lot of people kind of graduate where I'm from and they go build like these gated communities for rich people in Egypt. I decided to work for a startup in Egypt that was building off-grid, 100% net zero, solar powered communities in the Egyptian desert with low embodied carbon materials, natural materials that were found in the desert. So it all sounds super fancy, super cool, but it wasn't easy. And basically what we did is we would go to these oases in Egypt where people were looking for sustainable farming outside in those oases. And what ended up happening, I was one of 20 people to kind of co-found this company. Now this company is 100 plus people in Egypt, and they supply some of the major solar powered infrastructure. And I cannot stress enough the impact of the communities in those Egyptian areas. They've managed to hire so many local communities there, and they have full ownership over how to operate, maintain, and even install the solar panels. So very cool. And I'll end at that. Have a good evening, guys.
Okay, let's go to our online questions. There's quite a bit of conversation that's happening online, but I have two. And maybe one person can answer each, or a couple if we really feel that. So one person said from the chat, I would like to know how the panelists link together the subjects of energy efficiency, energy poverty, and the current housing challenge in Canada.
All right, I'll wade into this one. Energy efficiency, energy poverty, and affordability. So affordability for homeowners or renters is a massive thing, right? Rents are rising, interest rates are not falling, mortgages are coming due. How can I even think about energy efficiency when I can't afford all these other things, right? I would say the problem is the solution, right? You're looking at the telescope through the wrong end. It's not, I've got all of these problems, I can't do energy efficiency. It's, how can energy efficiency solve an affordability issue? How can energy efficiency address the energy poverty issue? And it takes some, not the same way we did it yesterday thinking. It takes looking at what is the best in North America, because a lot of times we ignore Europe, right? But let's look at what is the best in North America in terms of, direct install weatherization programs in communities that definitely can use some energy poverty relief, and putting that against the cost of new generation or even the paybacks associated societally on doing that, right? And for 40 years, the United States has been doing a weatherization program, which is amongst their most successful program. And it's a direct install program where they go to somebody's home or apartment and they say, we're going to go and do some air sealing with some this, some lighting, some whatever. And $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 later, they have a much lower operating costs, right? There is a bankable business case on that. And there's 40 years of evidence that it works, right? So all to say, for those that have the dollars in the bank, right, that's not a consideration. But for those where I don't have the dollars in the bank, either a direct install approach, which the provinces or the feds can address, or if you're talking about clean tech financing, which is a huge thing, impact financing, like these cool people at TAF, right? They're doing all sorts of low carbon city stuff. And the financing opportunities for EV, for deep retrofit, and even municipalities with local improvement charges and stuff like that, and green financing like the HELP program in Toronto. They're really helping people address some of those issues. And first and foremost is the issue of affordability, access, and energy poverty. It's not off the table. It's definitely on the table. So push your political people, push your energy people, push your utilities. But honestly, those solutions are out there and they've been done. We just have to bring them here.
If I can give, if I can give a practical example to try to answer the question, and I just want to give kudos to whoever asked that question. That was a very great question. Loaded question, but a great question. The best example that I can think about, a friend of mine came up with this model. It's called Penguin Living. And essentially what he did, the model that he established, was taking any residence and now making that residence fully accessible. Let's say on one floor, assuming it's a bungalow. You can do this with a two-story building as well, or home. Making it fully accessible, making the basement fully accessible as well. You don't have to, but making an income suite. And with the new initiatives with laneway housing, the model that he established was a laneway house in the back and the income property in the basement, along with the living quarters on the main floor and or second floor. In his case, he made it all retirement proof, if you will, and I am a big fan of that. I call it generational living, because we're healthy today, we don't know where we're gonna be at tomorrow. And right now, retirement homes, we all know the cost of that. We all know the need for them. So he's solving multiple problems. So if we tackle this at a fundamental level, the question was energy efficiency. How do we tackle that if there's no money? To Kirk's point, there are many grants out there. There's a lot of great programs. So we start by education. So we start, and one of our biggest fights is tackling the city so that whenever a permit gets issued, that they can hopefully one day tackle the incentive right next to it. So before they even break ground, that they can know about the program before it's too late. So there are grants and ways to offset the cost of whatever's being done so that whatever renovation, whatever work is being done can be more efficient. So that's how we tackle the energy efficiency. So how do we tackle the poverty? The poverty by adding those extra income outlets, whether that be a basement, whether that be a laneway suite, And there are many ways to tackle that. There are many grants, there are many different types of loans. And right now with the housing crisis that we have, you're guaranteed a renter the minute it's finished, not even when it's finished. As they see you putting it up, you can start advertising it. And the last one is affordability. And I'm gonna circle back to those grants. And I'm gonna circle back to think about it as an investment up front with the grants available and with the money that is to come. That is how everything comes full circle. And in his model, I don't mean to silo it just to his model, but I wanted to give you a real life application. So he has different houses, some that he's selling, some that he's keeping. In his model, some of them, he is having this program where it's lease to own. So for personal care workers, doesn't necessarily have to be a personal care worker, but he's making it so that they can lease this property as a way for them to become entrepreneurs. Part of efficiency is societal. How do we solve societal issues? How do we help our communities? How do we help our people become better and be better for our whole environment? And I think that is one example on how we tackle that question, if that's fair.
That was awesome. Thank you. That was so super tangible for us. And giving us steps is important when we think about these very sort of like solving these lofty, social issues. One more question before we end off the panel. I am interested to know a bit about the emissions system boundaries, scope 2 and up/downstream. How in practicality, okay, sorry, I think it's a little bit worded, okay. How in practicality do the panel practitioners, how do they implement or overlook these emissions?
Scope 2, Scope 3 boundaries, like that stuff is, depending on the province you're in and which level of rigor that you're looking for, I would say look at best practices at CAGBC. If you want to get granular, if you want to stick to the higher portfolio level, look at RealPAC, and they have a GRESB program, which is an international program which compares buildings in Europe, buildings in the United States, and buildings in Canada against each other and says, where should I invest my pension fund money, right? And they have a definition of how they treat Scope 2, Scope 3, and stuff like that. So it's not how do we define it, it's how the rules that you adhere to or that your investors adhere to, right? And so I would say look at, if you're feeling asset manager-ish, look at GRESB standards. If you're looking at, standard reporting stuff, look at things like CAGBC's best practices, BOMA, and if you care, you can, look at some other stuff too. But they all, it's all there. You can look it up on the internet too, right? It's not for me to say granular how you do it. It's people have created standards, look them up. Sorry, but yeah. Google it, man. Right.
I think just from what I know from the EnerGuide standpoint, something that they do take into consideration is where the energy is coming from. So in Alberta, a lot of the electricity is actually still, some of it is still coal, sadly, but then we're also becoming more renewable. And then of course, where is our heating coming from? It's coming from natural gas. So, and it depends per province. So I think one good thing that is built into HOT 2000, which is a software that we use for the EnerGuide and energy advisor role, is that we can take into consideration where our energy is coming from. And that does get calculated in terms of gigajoules at the end of the day. And so we are able to say, hey, this house is using this many gigajoules for real based on where their energy is coming from. So it is being considered. And I think it's a really great question because we're talking about carbon footprint for real, not just a heat pump.
What's the saying? Every kilowatt counts? Every kilowatt counts. Well, that concludes our panel today. Please give them a huge round of applause. Yes. I want you to clap for yourselves at home, and I want you to clap for yourselves here. Give yourselves a round of applause.
That was a long panel. That was a lot of information.
You guys are very patient. Thank you.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Thank you to those online. This is our first time trying something like this, and we're definitely going to do it again. So stay tuned for more.